Hello everyone, and yeah, it looks like we might have some extra news today, because Games Workshop might have just casually announced the brand new faction that will come into Warhammer the Old World. You see, the new rulebook is different, right? The logo's at the front, it's obviously quite different. It's 1.5 edition, by the way, so it's just the rules that we already have with the erratas, which is great. But at the bottom, there are faction logos representing all the factions that are playable in Warhammer the Old World. Now, Grand Cafe has been added in here, and obviously the Warriors of Chaos have changed, but if you would have noticed, there is another Chaos icon at the bottom, a Norscan shield, and this makes me believe that maybe the next faction after Grand Cafe is finally going to be Norsca or maybe Northern Tribes. Hear me out. As you can see here, compared to the older rulebook, that logo was never there, and Norsca still isn't fully represented in the old world. However, we've just had some brand new Marauders, we've also had Marauder Horsemen, and an Arcane Journal kind of focusing around them, this whole being like the Berserkers, Marauder Chieftains, and the rest. Mostly focusing around kit bashes, right? The current core rulebook has an entry for Wolves of the Sea, and this is very similar to that of the same style of entry that Grand Cafe has gotten, and also Kislev. Kislev is still not playable. Now, yes, we do have Wolves of the Sea already through an Arcane Journal, but I do believe that this actually is going to be pushed further for a full Norscan tribe type of army. Maybe not even just Norscans, maybe Northmen in general. So as you can see, yes, the logo is that of the current new shields, and, well, pretty much the older shields for the Norscan Marauders, which is good to see, but it makes no sense to have Warriors of Chaos and then a second Warriors of Chaos logo unless they were planning on splitting them up. Lore-wise, this has made a lot of sense, in all honesty, because the Norscans are very different to the Warriors of Chaos. The Kurgans are very different to the Warriors of Chaos. Yes, they're still kind of tied together, because, you know, that's where most of the Chaos Warriors come from. But there are different faction styles, fighting styles, hell, even unit styles, which we've only really been seeing represented in, really, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and Total War Warhammer. Warhammer Fantasy never really dived too deep into the different cultures. We did have some supplements which gave us some different types of troops and stuff, mostly for like the vampires, but the Arcane Journal system and in general how it's working for the old world, things are splitting up. But if that's the case, what could happen to a potential Norsca book in the old world? Now, when we look towards the Wolves of the Sea army list, there's already a basis of a good start. Marauder Horsemen, Marauder, like Chaos Marauders, Marauder Tribe Chieftains, Marauder Tribe Berserkers, and Marauder Tribe Huskarls. The Huskarls, the Berserkers, and the Chieftains don't have their own models, but it could be possible we could see them have their own fully fleshed out models in the future, adding a few more units, so a Marauder Shaman, some Marauder Chariots, hell, the Mammoth, everyone's been asking for a plastic war Mammoth for a while, and then bring in some other stuff like the Cursed Etin, which has been missing, bring back the Skin Wolves, which are available to the standard Army of Infamy right now, but, you know, make it a proper troop, and there we go. Now, I do know what people would be saying here, well, this is just basically Chaos Light, and that's basically how, well, the Norscans are treated in Total War too. But the basis here could be a smaller faction with its own dedicated lords and heroes, and also being allowed to be used by the Warriors of Chaos, meaning that the Warriors of Chaos would be the central front, and the Norscans would be a sub-faction to them. You could go Norsca purely by its own, but if you decide to play Warriors of Chaos, you can mix and match between them. That's just a theory I've got, and I think it could work out quite well, rather than having this dependency on Chaos Warriors, Chaos Chariots, and the rest. It does make sense considering that Games Workshop has been changing up how Marauders work. They no longer take the marks anymore, they still have the Mark of Undivided, but rather than getting the Mark of Khorne, Sanash, Nurgle, or Tzeentch, they focus on the cults. This is more of a Chaos Light situation, but I think it works out quite well to have a cult-style army. Especially since some of those cult marks are actually quite good, so rather than having them as a one-use only, which is kind of bad, I'm not going to lie, having them dedicated to your full army and used kind of like marks fully, but as long as you're playing as Norsca, not as the Warriors of Chaos. If Games Workshop wanted to do something very special, provided that this could be true, then we could end up seeing some Thamir come back, and literally just going through like the Norsca roster in Total War Warhammer. So Famir Lords and Heroes, well, we don't have a lord for them, but you know what I mean. Some Skinwolf heroes would be great. The War Mammoth with a War Shrine. Maybe even some Frost Trolls, well, Ice Trolls, bring back the Dreadmore. If they go just Norsca, probably not, right? But if they go full-on Tribes of the North, possible? You know, Norscan Giants. Giants have been removed, by the way, from the website. So that's a possibility there that they're going to get redone. Maybe even get in some Kurgan units. I think it's really important to note that Kurgans are different, but Asov are cool. So the ever-chosen for this specific setting is a Kurgan. So getting some Kurgan riders would be cool. Maybe do what Creative Assembly wouldn't do and give them some bows. Would have been lovely. Some nice long skirmishing range troopers would have been great. And hell, if Games Workshop really wanted to go full on ham, imagine a list for Kurgan, a list for Norsca, a list for the Hung also. It'd be really cool to see the northern tribes fully explored. And that's the only reason why I'm thinking about this, because, you know, that logo means that they've got something else in mind, not full-on Chaos Warriors, but something else. And I think that that might be what is going to happen. Maybe I'm wrong here, but no other faction is represented on the core rulebook twice. And it's still, I mean, it could be for the sake of synergy, but I don't know. I don't think so. If that was the case, they would have moved around certain shields to kind of synergize a little bit better. This looks like a obvious stylistic kind of hinting towards the future type of thing. And I do hope that's the case. It would have been nice to see some proper, you know, Marauder Tribe Berserkers and Huskarls and the rest, rather than just kit bashing them, which you can't do nowadays with the newer kits, because they're not very kit bashable. They're very focused around being more monoposy, which is something that I don't like around the new kits a lot, if I can be very honest. You can't really do too much with them, which kind of loses a bit of the flavor of the old world or Warhammer Fantasy in general. That's not to say that the new models aren't good, because look, I've got 2 of the battalion boxes for the Norskins that I want to crack open. I've just been a little busy with the cafe stuff, if you've been seeing my posts on Twitter. I like them. I really like them. I think they look really, really cool. I was just waiting and hoping that we might see some like characters to kind of make a proper themed army rather than using Chaos Warriors. It looks like we might get there. Or, you know, not using the Age of Sigmar models, which look cool too, but you know, it's not from that setting. I'd love to see loads of new Norscan troops. I'd like to see new troops in general, not just updated models, though the updated models so far are looking great. I'm feeling fairly hopeful for the old world, so hopefully this continues. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion. Maybe I'm just like looking way too into it, but I know a lot of other people have been going, oh, this is weird, you know? So it's clear that it's not just me looking at it. And yeah, I'll see you guys very, very soon. Battle reports begin again next week, guys. The table's up. The temperature's cooling a little bit. Finally. Have a good one, guys. I'll see you all again very, very soon. Bye.